My parents treated Sunday brunch like a performance art piece where I was the prop that didn't quite fit the set design. As I parked outside their pristine Westbridge Colonial, I prepared myself for the usual menu. Mimosas served with a side of pity regarding my stagnant career. They were ready to toast my sister's new country club membership, completely unaware that the most exclusive door in the world was about to open for the daughter they had already written off. The gravel driveway of my parents' home in Westbridge, Connecticut, always sounded judgmental. It was a specific kind of crushed stone, imported and raked into immaculate, manicured lines that crunched loudly under the tires of my 5-year-old sedan, announcing my arrival with a lack of stealth that set my teeth on edge. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror before killing the engine. At 32, I thought I would have outgrown the stomach-churning anxiety of Sunday brunch, but the sensation was as reliable as the tides. My mother, Lorraine, called these weekly gatherings family time, but they were actually performance reviews with catered pastries. I stepped out into the humid, late-morning air. The house loomed above me, a sprawling colonial revival that had been expanded twice since I was a child. It was a beautiful house, the kind that appeared in lifestyle magazines under headlines about hosting the perfect autumn gathering. But to me, it always felt like a museum where I was the only visitor who refused to follow the guided tour. I smoothed the front of my linen trousers. They were practical, comfortable, and exactly the sort of thing Lorraine would describe as brave. I had recently stepped back from a high-pressure marketing career in the city to work as a freelance copy editor, a move I considered a victory for my mental health, but which my family viewed as a tragic collapse of ambition. When I reached the front door, it swung open before I could knock. My father, Graham, stood there, holding a Scotch glass despite it being barely 11 in the morning. "Bella," he said. He did not smile, but he did step aside to let me in. "You are early. I am on time." "Dad," I said, stepping into the foyer. The air inside was cool and smelled of beeswax and expensive lilies. "Tessa is running late," he said, as if this explained why my punctuality was an inconvenience. Miles could not find his keys. You know how it is. I did not know how it was, because if I had been late, the lecture on responsibility would have started before I crossed the threshold. But Tessa was 27, the golden child, and her chaos was treated as charming whimsy. I walked into the dining room. The table was already set, and it looked less like a lunch arrangement and more like an altar. There were fresh hydrangeas in crystal vases, linen napkins folded into swans, and place cards written in my mother's looping, aggressive calligraphy. There were 6 settings: my parents, me, Tessa, Miles, and 2 others. "We have guests?" I asked, gesturing to the unfamiliar names. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance." Lorraine swept in from the kitchen. Carrying a platter of smoked salmon, she was wearing a silk blouse that cost more than my first car, and her hair was a helmet of perfect blonde highlights. "The Vances are old friends from the club," she said, not looking at me as she adjusted a fork that was already straight. "We thought it would be nice to have some lively conversation. Try to be engaging. Bella, no one wants to hear about the editing business. It sounds so dusty. It is remote work." "Mom," I said, my voice keeping a practiced, neutral level. "It allows me to travel if I want." "But you don't, do you?" she said, finally turning to give me a tight, pitying smile. "You are just at your apartment, resting, recuperating," I corrected, though I knew it did not matter. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the Vances. They were a couple in their 60s, polished and loud, the kind of people who took up all the oxygen in a room just by existing. I was introduced as the eldest daughter, followed immediately by the disclaimer that I was taking some time to figure things out. I shook hands, smiled until my cheeks hurt, and took my assigned seat at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door. We waited 20 minutes for Tessa. When she finally burst through the front door, the energy in the house shifted instantly. It was as if a spotlight had been switched on. Tessa came in a whirlwind of laughter and expensive perfume, clinging to the arm of Miles Hartley, her boyfriend of 2 years. Miles was a nice enough guy, a wealth management associate with a jawline that made up for his lack of personality. But today he looked particularly smug. "So sorry," Tessa announced, dropping her designer bag on the hallway floor for the housekeeper to deal with later. The traffic on the bridge was a nightmare, and Miles insisted on stopping for coffee. We didn't mind waiting. "Sweetheart," Graham said, beaming. He never beamed at me. "Come, sit. We have news to celebrate." Tessa slid into her seat, center stage, pushing her sunglasses up into her hair. She looked radiant. I had to admit, she had that glow that comes from never having to worry if a debit card will be declined. "We certainly do," Tessa said, grabbing a mimosa before the toast was even proposed. "But you guys go first." Lorraine clapped her hands together. No, you tell the Vances." Tessa looked around the table, feigning modesty. "Well, it is official. As of yesterday, Miles and I have been accepted into Juniper Ridge." The Vances gasped with theatrical delight. Juniper Ridge was not just a country club. In Westbridge, it was the inner sanctum. It was where deals were made, marriages were arranged, and social standing was cemented. The waiting list was 5 years long and required sponsorship from 3 board members. "That is incredible!" "Mrs. Vance shrieked. "How on earth did you manage it so young?" Tessa winked at my father. "Let us just say we had some amazing connections pulling for us. Daddy made a few calls, and Miles's family knows the board president. It was a team effort." I sat silently, picking at the corner of my napkin. I remembered applying for a small business grant 3 years ago and asking my father for a letter of recommendation. He had declined, telling me that I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet because handouts weaken the character. "That is wonderful, Tessa," I said. I tried to inject warmth into my voice, but it came out thin. Lorraine looked at me sharply. "It is more than wonderful, Bella. It is essential. In Tessa's world, you need a place to network. You cannot build a future from a home office." The dig was subtle, smooth as polished glass. I took a sip of water to wash down the bitterness. Graham stood up then, tapping his glass with a silver spoon. He cleared his throat, commanding the room's attention. "Lorraine and I are so proud," he began. "We know that membership fees at Juniper are substantial, especially the initiation. We did not want that burden to start your life together off on the wrong foot." He reached behind him and produced a large, gift-wrapped envelope. Tessa's eyes went wide. "No way. Dad, you didn't—" "We wanted to," Lorraine said, her voice trembling with performed emotion. "Consider it an investment in your future." Tessa tore open the envelope. I could see the check from where I sat. It was 5 figures. I knew the initiation fee at Juniper Ridge was $50,000. Tessa squealed, jumping up to hug Graham, then Lorraine. Miles shook my father's hand with the vigor of a man who just saved a fortune. The Vances applauded. I clapped, too. My hands felt like wood. It was not the money. I did not want the money. I paid my own rent, my own student loans, my own grocery bills. It was the visibility. Tessa was an investment. I was a cost center that had been cut from the budget. As the excitement settled and the salmon was finally served, Lorraine turned the conversation to the guests, basking in the glow of her benevolence. "We just want our girls to be settled," Lorraine said to Mrs. Vance. Though her eyes flickered over me, "Tessa is on such a clear path. And Bella, well, Bella is between chapters right now." "I am not between chapters," I said, struggling to keep my voice light. "I am working. I have 3 clients on retainer." Lorraine waved a hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. Darling, you are figuring out who you are. It is very brave. I would be terrified to be 32 and unanchored, but you handle it with such resignation." The table went quiet. The insult hung in the air. Dressed up as a compliment, Graham, sensing the tension, decided to pivot. "Oh, that reminds me. Bella, something came for you." "For me?" I asked. "I haven't lived here in 10 years. "It came to the house address," Graham said. He reached toward the sideboard, where a pile of mail sat. He shuffled through a few magazines before pulling out a small, cream-colored envelope. He tossed it across the table toward me. It slid over the polished mahogany and stopped next to my water glass. I looked down. It was heavy. The paper was thick, textured, the kind of stationery you have to go to a specialty shop to find. There was no return address, just a blind embossed emblem that looked like a shield or a crest, and a contact number typed in minimalist serif font. My name was handwritten in calligraphy that made my mother's handwriting look like scribbles. Ms. Bella Coleman. "What is that?" Tessa asked, leaning forward, her mouth full of quiche. I picked it up. On the back, there was a seal. Real red wax, stamped with the same emblem. Who sends letters with wax seals anymore? Miles laughed. "Is that from a vampire?" The table chuckled. "It looks like a prop," Lorraine said, squinting at it. "Open it, Bella." "It is probably another marketing thing. They make them look fancy to get you to open them. Probably a credit card offer or one of those scam travel clubs." "It does not look like junk mail," I said quietly. Tessa snorted. "It is Bella's Hogwarts letter. Finally arrived. 20 years late. Maybe you can major in magic since the business degree didn't work out." The Vances laughed loudly at that. My face grew hot. The heat started in my chest and crawled up my neck. It was the casual cruelty that hurt the most. The way they turned my life into a punchline for an audience of strangers. I slid a finger under the flap. Breaking the wax, it cracked with a satisfying snap that cut through the laughter. Inside was a single card. The text was engraved, not printed. I could feel the indentation of the letters under my thumb. "The office of the Alderbrook Foundation requests the pleasure of your company at a private reception regarding a matter of legacy and appointment. Date, the 4th of February. Location, the St. James Parlor, New York City. Strict ERSVP required. Identification will be verified upon entry." There were no graphics, no slogans, no sales pitch, just the weight of the words. "Well?" Graham asked. "Buttering a roll? Is it a bill?" I stared at the card. "Legacy and appointment. I am not sure." I said, "Let me see." Tessa reached for it. I pulled it back, tucking it quickly into my purse. "It is just a survey." I lied. "A survey for a distinct alumni group. Boring stuff." Lorraine rolled her eyes. "So secretive. Honestly, Bella, you act like you have state secrets. Eat your salmon before it gets cold." I picked up my fork, but my appetite was gone. The envelope in my bag felt heavy, like it was generating its own gravity. The Alderbrook Foundation. I had never heard of it. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I need to use the restroom. Sit down." "Bella," Graham said, his voice dropping an octave. "We are eating. I just need a moment," I said. I walked out of the dining room, keeping my back straight until I turned the corner into the hallway. The moment I was out of sight, I rushed to the powder room and locked the door. My hands were shaking. I pulled the card out again. It looked even more serious in the harsh light of the vanity mirror. I pulled out my phone and typed Alderbrook Foundation into the search bar. The results were sparse. That was the first thing that struck me. In an age where every charity had a flashy Instagram and a donation portal, the Alderbrook Foundation had a single landing page. The background was a deep, slate gray. The text was white. The Alderbrook Foundation. Established 1922. Private Philanthropy and Heritage Management. London, New York, Vienna. There was no About Us page with smiling staff photos. There was no Donate button. There was just a login portal for members and a general inquiry number. The same number typed on my invitation. I searched for news articles. Nothing in the major papers. Then, I dug deeper. Scrolling to page 10 of the search results, I found a mention in an archived article from a financial journal about European royal assets. The sentence was dense. Various holdings managed through discrete entities such as the Alderbrook Trust, often used to obscure direct sovereign involvement in private sector patronage. I lowered the phone. My reflection looked pale. My family thought I was a failure because I didn't have a corner office or a country club membership, but this felt like a door to a room they didn't even know existed. I flushed the toilet just to make noise, washed my hands, and took a deep breath. I had to go back out there. I had to sit through the rest of the brunch, watch Tessa preen over her membership, and endure my mother's critiques of my hair, my clothes, and my life choices. But I had the envelope. When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved on to the upcoming summer gala at Juniper Ridge. "We will have to get you a proper dress." "Tessa," Lorraine was saying, "something designer. We can go into the city next week. Bella, you should come. You can hold our bags." Lorraine laughed. She touched my arm. "I am kidding. Darling, you have no sense of humor lately." I smiled. It was the best acting performance of my life. "I think I will pass. Mom, I have a lot of work to catch up on." "Suit yourself," she said, turning back to the Vances. "Bella is very private. We worry she isolates herself. But what can you do?" I ate my salmon. I drank my water. I nodded when spoken to. But in my head, I was already on a train to New York. The brunch lasted another hour. By the time I walked back to my car, my jaw ached from clenching it. "Drive safe," Graham called from the porch. "Don't be a stranger, even if you are busy with your projects." I waved and got into my car. As soon as I turned onto the main road, away from the manicured silence of Westbridge, I let out a scream that had been building in my chest for 3 hours. It was a raw, guttural sound that scraped my throat. I drove back to my apartment in New Haven. It was a small one-bedroom in a converted factory building. Exposed brick, drafty windows, and rent I could actually afford. It was my sanctuary. I spent the afternoon pacing. I put the invitation on my coffee table and stared at it. I made tea. I let the tea get cold. I cleaned my kitchen. At 7 in the evening, the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across my living room floor. I could not wait anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang once, twice, Alderbrook office. A woman's voice answered, clear, crisp, professional. "No, how can I help you? Just the name." "Hello," I said. My voice sounded small in the empty apartment. I cleared my throat. "My name is Bella Coleman. I received an invitation today." "One moment. Ms. Coleman." There was no hold music, just silence. It lasted for maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Then, a different voice came on the line. This one was older, warmer, but with a steel core. "Ms. Coleman," the voice said. "Thank you for calling. I am Marion Voss, the director of the New York chapter. We were hoping you would reach out." "Is this real?" I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. My family thought it was a joke. "I assure you, it is not a joke," Marion said. "How did you get my parents' address?" I asked. "I haven't lived there in years. We have maintained a file on your family for a long time," she said, "though we have never had cause to open contact until now." "A file?" My grip on the phone tightened. "Why?" "The invitation specifies that this is a matter of legacy." Marion said, "We operate with strict discretion." "I don't understand." I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. "My family is... We are just suburban Connecticut people. We aren't connected to foundations or heritage management. My father sells commercial insurance. My mother plans garden parties. We are not interested in your parents," Marion said. Her tone was dismissive, almost abruptly so. "Then why me?" "Because of your grandmother," Marion said. I frowned. "My grandmother? You mean Lorraine's mother?" "She passed away 10 years ago. She was a librarian." "No," Marion said. "Not the maternal line. We are speaking of your father's mother, Elaine Coleman." I froze. Elaine. I had loved my grandmother Elaine deeply, but I hadn't thought of her in the context of power or secrets. She had been a quiet woman, practical and kind. She lived in a small cottage on the edge of town, grew tomatoes, and knitted blankets. She had died when I was 22. "Grandma Elaine?" I said. She was just a housewife. She volunteered at the animal shelter." Marion paused. The silence on the line was heavy with things unsaid. Elaine Coleman was a woman of many layers. Ms. Coleman, for 40 years. She served as a distinct confidential liaison for our organization. She was one of our most trusted volunteers. My brain refused to compute this. Grandma Elaine, who clipped coupons and watched daytime soap operas? That is impossible. I said, "It is fact," Marion replied, and before she passed, she left specific instructions. She placed a request that her seat, her role within our network, be offered to her granddaughter, but not immediately. She requested we wait until you had weathered a storm. I looked around my apartment, the small space, the secondhand furniture, the silence of a life I was rebuilding from scrap. Weathered a storm. I repeated. She believed that character is not formed in comfort. Marion said, "She wanted to ensure you were ready. We have been monitoring your progress. We believe the time is right to extend the invitation." Monitoring my progress. The word sent a chill down my spine. "What does this mean?" I asked. "What is the appointment?" "That is not a discussion for the telephone," Marion said. "But I can tell you this. It is an opportunity to serve a cause far greater than yourself. And it is an opportunity to step out of the shadows your family has cast over you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Ms. Coleman," Marion continued, "the reception on the 4th is mandatory if you wish to proceed. If you do not attend, the file will be closed, and we will not contact you again." I looked at the invitation on the table. I thought of the brunch, the look on Lorraine's face when she called me unanchored, the way Graham had tossed this envelope across the table like it was trash. "I will be there," I said. "Excellent," Marion said. "Bring identification. And Ms. Coleman?" "Yes?" "Do not bring your family." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. My hand was trembling. I walked over to the window and looked out at the streetlights flickering on. For years, I had felt like I was swimming upstream, fighting to be seen, fighting to be valued in a family that only measured worth in net worth and country club memberships. I thought about Tessa's investment. I thought about the wax seal. My grandmother had a secret life, and she had chosen me. Not Tessa, not my father, me. I went to my closet and pulled out the garment bag that held my one good suit, the one I used for high-stakes interviews. I unzipped it and ran my hand over the fabric. I wasn't between chapters. I was turning the page. The urge to call my mother was a reflex, buried deep in my nervous system like the instinct to flinch when a door slammed. Sitting at my kitchen table the morning after the phone call with Marion Voss, I stared at my cell phone. The screen was dark, reflecting my own pale, tired face. I could hear Lorraine's voice in my head, scripting the conversation before it even happened. "Oh, Bella, don't get your hopes up. It is probably a pyramid scheme. Did they ask for your social security number? You are so naive. Darling, just focus on your little editing jobs." If I told her, she would dismantle the excitement piece by piece until I was left holding nothing but doubt. Or worse, she would take over. She would demand to know who Marion Voss was. She would Google the foundation. She would find a way to make it hers. I put the phone down, face first, on the table. No, for the first time in my life, I was going to starve the reflex. I was not going to ask for permission, and I was not going to ask for validation. I opened my banking app. The balance in my savings account was meager, a carefully hoarded sum labeled emergency fund. It was meant for car repairs, dental emergencies, or the terrifying possibility of a slow month with clients. It was safety. It was responsible. I transferred $300 to my checking account. I booked a round-trip train ticket to New York City and reserved a room at a mid-range hotel in Chelsea for one night. It was not luxury, but it was clean, and more importantly, it was mine. As I clicked confirm, a wave of nausea rolled through me, followed immediately by a sharp, electric jolt of adrenaline. I felt guilty, reckless, and terrifyingly alive. 2 days later, I stood outside a limestone building on the Upper East Side. The Alderbrook Foundation did not have a sign. There was no brass plaque, no banner. There was just a heavy iron door and a small intercom panel. It sat on a block lined with consulates and private schools. The kind of street where the trees were trimmed into perfect geometric shapes and the silence cost millions of dollars. I pressed the buzzer. Bella Coleman, I said into the speaker. The door clicked open with a heavy, magnetic thud. The interior was not what I expected. I had anticipated velvet ropes or marble statues, something trying to scream money. Instead, the lobby was understated to the point of austerity. The floors were herringbone oak, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. The walls were a dove gray, hung with black and white architectural photographs. It smelled of old paper and fresh coffee. A woman sat at a sleek reception desk. She did not ask for my name. She simply nodded toward a set of double doors. "Ms. Voss is expecting you in the library," she said. I walked through the doors and found myself in a room lined floor to ceiling with books. At the far end, sitting in a leather wingback chair, was Marion Voss. She looked exactly as she had sounded on the phone, steel wrapped in silk. She was perhaps 60, wearing a charcoal blazer that fit her with architectural precision. Her hair was silver, cut into a sharp bob, and she wore no jewelry other than a simple gold watch. She did not stand up when I entered, but she smiled. It was not the wide, teeth-baring smile my mother used for social climbing. It was small, precise, and reached her eyes. "You are punctual," Marion said. Elaine always appreciated punctuality. She said it was the only virtue that cost nothing but bought everything. I stopped in the center of the room, clutching my bag. "You talk about her as if you saw her yesterday," I said. Marion gestured to the empty chair opposite her. "Sit, Bella. We have a great deal to cover." I sat. The leather creaked softly. "I assume you have questions," Marion said. "I have nothing but questions," I replied. "My family thinks this foundation is a marketing scam. I had to look you up on the 10th page of a search result to find a connection to royalty. And you claim my grandmother, who spent her life making pot roast and knitting Afghans, was a liaison for a European royal household. So, yes, I am confused." Marion nodded, looking pleased by my bluntness. "Let us clarify the nature of the Alderbrook Foundation," she said. "We are not a celebrity charity. We do not host galas for the sake of being photographed. We are a patronage network affiliated with the House of Saxe-Weimar, a minor branch, historically speaking, but one with significant custodial responsibilities regarding art, history, and humanitarian aid across Europe." She paused, watching me closely. "Royalty, in the modern era, is less about crowns and more about governance." Marion continued, "It is about the quiet movement of resources to preserve culture and dignity. It requires discretion. It requires people who can walk into a room, assess the temperature, and solve problems without making a sound." "And my grandmother did this?" I asked. "For 40 years. Marion said. "She was not a donor. Bella, she was an operative." The word hung in the air. Operative. It sounded like spy fiction, but Marion's tone made it sound like accounting. "Elaine managed our donor relations in the tri-state area." Marion explained. "She vetted potential patrons. She handled delicate refusals. She ensured that money came from clean sources and went to the right projects. She was brilliant at reading people. She could spot a social climber from a mile away, and she knew exactly how to close a door in their face without them realizing they had been rejected." I sat back, stunned. I thought of Grandma Elaine, sitting on her porch swing, listening to my mother rant about a neighbor's lawn decorations. Elaine would just nod, sip her iced tea, and offer a vague, soothing comment. I realized now that she hadn't been passive. She had been managing my mother. "But why hide it?" I asked, my voice rising. "Why act like a suburban housewife? Why not tell us?" "Because she was not Elaine Coleman to us." Marion said quietly. She volunteered under her first name, Elaine Archer. I blinked. "Archer?" "Her first marriage," Marion said. "Before she met your grandfather. Before the Coleman family narrative took over. She kept that part of her identity separate. She felt that if she merged her work here with her life in Westbridge, the work would be compromised. Compromised. I repeated. She thought we would ruin it." Marian did not deny it. She leaned forward, clasping her hands. Elaine loved her family, Bella, but she was a realist. She saw the dynamics in your household. She saw the hunger for status in your parents. She knew that if they knew she had a direct line to a royal household, they would have tried to exploit it. They would have wanted invites. They would have wanted the connection for the sake of the connection. I felt a flash of defensive anger, followed instantly by the crushing weight of truth. If Lorraine had known, she would have turned Elaine's volunteer work into a weapon at every dinner party. My mother, the royal liaison, it would have been unbearable. So she hid it. I said, my voice hollow. She hid the best part of herself. She protected it. Marian corrected. And when she was dying, she wrote a recommendation. She said that of all her descendants, there was only one who had the temperament to understand the work. She said you were the only one who listened more than you spoke. I felt tears prick my eyes. I looked down at my hands. She wanted you to have her seat. Marian said, not as a gift, but as a trial. A provisional seat on the regional steering committee. I looked up. What does that mean? It means you would help us evaluate grant proposals and donor suitability. Marian said, it is unpaid, voluntary service. It involves paperwork, background checks, and difficult decisions. It is not glamorous. It is work. I am not qualified. I said, I am an editor. I fix grammar. Elaine was a librarian. Marian countered, competence is not about your resume. Bella, it is about your instincts. She reached into a leather folder on the table and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She slid it across the mahogany toward me. This is a test, she said. I looked at the paper. It was a printed email, dated 2 days ago. Subject, Restoration Grant, St. Jude's Chapel. From Mr. Arthur Pendleton. Dear Committee, I am prepared to fully fund the restoration of the 17th century frescoes at the St. Jude site, provided that the foundation agrees to rename the chapel wing the Pendleton Family Gallery and allows me to host my daughter's wedding there this coming June. I expect a confirmation of these terms by Friday. I read it twice. This is a donor offering money. I said. Marian nodded. Arthur Pendleton is a real estate developer with significant liquidity. The chapel is in desperate need of repair. Without the funds, the frescoes will likely be lost to mold within the year. So we take the money? I asked. Marian raised an eyebrow. Do we? I looked at the email again. Rename the chapel. Host a wedding. I thought about the word patronage. I thought about what Marian had said about dignity. No, I said slowly. You cannot take it. Why not? Marian asked. Because he is not donating to the cause. I said, thinking aloud, he is buying a venue. If the foundation is about historical preservation, then the history comes first. Renaming a 17th century chapel after a modern real estate developer erases the history, and hosting a wedding? It turns a heritage site into an event hall. It cheapens the brand. If you say yes to him, every other donor will ask for a billboard. Marian's face remained impassive. So how do you respond? She asked. He is a powerful man. If you insult him, he could badmouth the foundation to other potential donors. Write the response. She handed me a silver pen and a notepad. Right now? I asked. Right now. My heart hammered. This was it. This was the test. I closed my eyes for a second, channeling the voice I used when I had to tell a difficult client that their manuscript was a disaster, but doing it in a way that made them thank me. I wrote for 5 minutes. The room was silent except for the scratching of the pen. When I finished, I handed the pad to Marian. She put on a pair of reading glasses and read it in silence. Dear Mr. Pendleton, the foundation is deeply moved by your generous interest in the St. Jude frescoes. Your recognition of their value speaks to a shared commitment to history. However, due to the strict historical covenants governing the site, we are legally unable to alter the naming rights or host private events of that scale within the chapel itself. We would hate to accept a gift that we cannot honor with the visibility you deserve. We would be delighted to discuss alternative recognition for your contribution, perhaps within our modern wing, where we can properly celebrate the Pendleton name without the constraints of the historical site, with gratitude. The committee? Marion lowered the pad. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. We would hate to accept a gift that we cannot honor. She repeated, that is a very polite way of telling him that his demands are impossible. Is it too soft? I asked. No, Marion said. She took off her glasses. It is diplomatic. You flattered his ego while drawing a hard line. You offered him an alternative that he will likely refuse, which solves our problem without us having to say the word no. She smiled again. Elaine was right. She said, You have the ear. She stood up. Come, she said. You have passed the entrance exam. Now you must survive the social portion. The reception was held at a townhouse in Marrowgate, a fictional neighborhood tucked between the Upper East Side and the river, where the streets were cobblestoned and the street lamps flickered with gaslight. I had changed at the hotel into a simple black cocktail dress I had bought on sale 3 years ago. It was modest, knee-length, with high-quality fabric but no flash. I felt underdressed until I walked into the venue. The room was filled with people, but it was hushed. There was no loud DJ, no clinking of aggressive toasts. A string quartet played in the corner, but they were playing something complex and melancholic, not pop covers. The guests were dressed beautifully, but not fashionably. I saw vintage couture, family jewelry that looked like it belonged in a vault, and men in tuxedos that had clearly been tailored 20 years ago and still fit perfectly. This was old money. This was money that didn't care if you knew it had money. Marion stayed by my side, guiding me through the room. That is the Belgian cultural attaché, she whispered, and the woman in the green silk is a trustee for the National Archives. Do not stare at her brooch. It was a gift from a czarina. I tried to keep my face neutral, masking the awe. We stopped at a small circle of people near the fireplace. Marion introduced me simply as Ms. Coleman, a new provisional member of the steering committee. A tall man with thinning hair and a face that looked like it had been etched from granite turned to me. He held a glass of sherry. Coleman, he said. The name rolled around his mouth like he was tasting it. I smiled. Yes, Bella Coleman. He looked at me with a sudden, sharp intensity. Not the Westbridge Colemans, surely, he asked. My stomach dropped. I had assumed anonymity here. Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady. That is my family. The man's expression shifted. It was not a sneer, exactly, but a cooling, a subtle withdrawal. Ah, he said, I recall a Graham Coleman attempting to join the board of the Preservation Trust a few years back. Very enthusiastic fellow. The word enthusiastic was doing a lot of heavy lifting. In this world, I realized, enthusiastic meant loud. It meant desperate. I know him, I said quietly. The man nodded, his eyes sliding away from me, looking for someone more important to talk to. Interesting, he murmured. I wasn't aware the family had legitimate ties to this circle. He turned his back to me, engaging the woman in green silk in conversation. I stood there, frozen. The rejection was so polite I almost missed it. He hadn't thrown a drink in my face. He had simply decided I didn't exist because of my last name. My father's reputation, his striving, his pushiness, had preceded me. Marion touched my elbow. Do not let it bleed, she whispered. He knows my father. I whispered back. He knows of your father. Marion corrected. There is a difference. Your father tries to buy entry. You are here by appointment. Remember that. I took a deep breath. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray just to have something to hold. I forced myself to stay in the circle, to listen, to nod at the right times. I did not retreat. By the time I left the reception 2 hours later, I was exhausted. My feet hurt, not from the heels, but from the tension of standing your ground when you feel like the floor is made of ice. I took the train back to Connecticut the next morning. The physical distance between New York and Westbridge was only an hour and a half, but the psychological distance felt like light years. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't want to, but I needed to see their faces. I needed to test the waters. Lorraine was in the kitchen, arranging flowers. Tessa was there, too, scrolling through her phone at the island counter. "Well, look who it is," Tessa said without looking up. "The traveler returns. Where were you? You didn't answer my text." "I went into the city," I said, leaning against the doorframe. Lorraine looked up, snipping a rose stem with a violent snip. "The city? What for?" "You hate the city. I had a meeting," I said, "with the foundation, the one from the invitation." Lorraine paused. She set the shears down. "You actually went?" she asked. "To that scam thing?" "It is not a scam, Mom," I said calmly. "It is a philanthropic network. I met with the director." Tessa put her phone down. Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of philanthropic network?" she asked. "Like, do they have parties?" "They have receptions," I said. "It is very quiet, mostly historical preservation." Lorraine let out a sharp laugh. "Historical preservation? That sounds incredibly dull. Did they ask you for money?" "No," I said. "They asked me to join a committee." There was a silence in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. "A committee?" Lorraine repeated. "Why? You don't have any money to give them." "Bella, they didn't ask for money." I said again. They said they were looking for people with time and organizational skills. I watched Lorraine's face closely. For a split second, her expression tightened. It was a flicker of something dark. Jealousy? Fear? It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual mask of dismissive concern. "Well," she said, picking up a hydrangea, "I suppose it gives you something to do. Just be careful. These little groups prey on lonely women. They make you feel special so you'll work for free. I am not lonely." "Mom," I said. Tessa hopped off the stool. "Wait," she said. "Is it exclusive? Like, do you get a +1? I looked at my sister. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She didn't care about the work. She cared about the access. "I am not sure." I lied. "It is all very provisional." Tessa shrugged. "Well, if they have a gala, let me know. I need to wear my new dress somewhere other than the club." I left 10 minutes later. They hadn't asked a single question about what the foundation actually did. They had only asked what it could give them. I drove back to my apartment, my mind racing. Marion had said Elaine left instructions. I went to my closet. On the top shelf, buried under old winter coats, was a plastic bin. It contained the few things I had kept after Grandma Elaine died. My parents had thrown out most of her junk, but I had salvaged a few boxes. I pulled the bin down and dumped it on the living room floor. Knitting needles, a half-finished scarf, a collection of porcelain thimbles, and a stack of old paperwork. I sifted through the papers. Recipes, utility bills from 1998, a calendar. And then I found it. It was a manila folder, locked with a red string. It was labeled in Elaine's handwriting, but not with her name. It just said, "For Bella. When she is ready." I had seen this folder years ago, but I had never opened it. I had assumed it was bonds or a will. I had been too grief-stricken to deal with it, and then I had forgotten. I unwound the string. Inside, there were no bonds. There were letters, dozens of them. Some were on the Alderbrook stationery. Some were on thick, cream paper with crests I didn't recognize. I picked up a receipt. It was dated 1985. Donation to the Vienna Boys Choir, $50. $50 was a lot of money for a housewife in 1985. I dug deeper. I found a list of names, contacts, NY, contacts, Larkhaven, VA, and at the very bottom of the stack, there was a small, handwritten note on a piece of blue cardstock. "My dearest Bella, if you are reading this, you have found the door. I could not give you this life while I was alive, because your father would have sold the key. But you are different. You know how to be still. Remember that silence is a sound, too. Do not let them make you small. And remember, not all doors open for the loudest. Love, Elaine." Archer. I traced the name Archer with my finger. My grandmother had lived a double life to protect something pure from the people she loved. And now, she had handed the baton to me. I looked at the list of contacts, Larkhaven, Virginia. I didn't know what was in Virginia, but I knew I was going to find out. I packed the papers back into the folder and slid it under my mattress. The brunch, the humiliation, the country club membership. It all felt small now. I had something they didn't have. I had a mission. The manila folder smelled of cedar and old dust, a scent that instantly transported me back to the attic of my grandmother's cottage. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by the paper trail of a life I had never known existed. Elaine Coleman, or Elaine Archer, as the documents insisted, had been a master of compartmentalization. I picked up a receipt from 1998. It was for a substantial donation to a literacy program in the Bronx. But the acknowledgement letter was not addressed to Mrs. Graham Coleman of Westbridge. It was addressed to E. Archer, care of the Alderbrook Trust. There were dozens of these, quiet injections of cash and support into small, struggling organizations, a women's shelter in Newark, a historical society in Delaware, a music scholarship fund in Vienna. And then there was the contact list. It was handwritten on a piece of yellow legal pad paper, the edges curling with age. The names were listed alphabetically, mostly in New York, with phone numbers that had likely changed 3 times since the list was written. But one entry stood out because it was circled in red ink. Larkhaven Art Center. Larkhaven, Virginia. Ask for Renee. Larkhaven. I knew the name. When I was 12, Grandma Elaine had gone away for a summer. She told my parents she was going to a wellness retreat in the Blue Ridge Mountains to help with her arthritis. My mother had scoffed, calling it her hippie pilgrimage, but my father had driven her to the train station without complaint. She hadn't gone to a retreat. She had gone to Larkhaven. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me, startling me. The screen displayed a blocked number. I picked it up. Hello, Bella. It is Marion Voss. Her voice was as crisp as a freshly starched shirt. I sat up straighter, instinctively smoothing my hair even though she couldn't see me. Marion, I said, is something wrong? On the contrary, Marion said. The committee has reviewed your handling of the Pendleton inquiry. They were impressed. You navigated the ego of a wealthy man without compromising the integrity of the site. It was a very Elaine solution. I felt a flush of pride that was warmer and more genuine than any praise I had ever received from a boss or a parent. Thank you, I said. Because of this, Marion continued, we are accelerating the timeline. There is a second gathering next Tuesday. It will be smaller than the reception in Marrowgate. Much stricter. Stricter how? I asked. It is a working session for the senior steering committee, Marion said. You will be formally introduced as Elaine's successor in a provisional capacity. You will not just be observing. Bella, you will be expected to weigh in on agenda items. My stomach did a slow, sickening flip. The reception had been terrifying, but all I had to do was stand there and hold a drink. This was performance. This was real. I don't know if I am ready for that, I said honestly. Elaine did not think you were ready because you knew the answers, Marion said firmly. She thought you were ready because you knew how to ask the questions. Tuesday, 6 o'clock. The library. Do not be late. She hung up before I could argue. I sat there for a long time, the silence of my apartment pressing in on me. Successor. The word felt heavy, like a crown made of iron. I needed to understand. I needed to know who Elaine Archer really was before I tried to step into her shoes. I looked at the yellow legal pad again. Larkhaven, Virginia. I had 5 days until the meeting. I packed a bag. The shift in my family began the moment I told them I had a second invitation. I had driven to Westbridge on Friday to drop off some mail that had come to my apartment from my father, an insurance packet he had accidentally routed to my old address. I hadn't planned to stay, but Lorraine blocked the doorway with a smile that was terrifyingly bright. Bella, come in. Come in. We were just having tea. I walked into the kitchen to find Tessa and Lorraine poring over a stack of fashion magazines. The atmosphere was weirdly electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Dad said you have another meeting with those foundation people, Tessa said, not looking up from a page featuring a $3,000 handbag. Next Tuesday? Yes, I said. putting the mail on the counter. It is a working session. Lorraine clapped her hands together. A working session. That sounds serious. That sounds like you are on the inside. She walked around the island and took my hands in hers. Her grip was tight. Bella, we need to talk about your presentation. My presentation? You cannot wear that black sack you wore to the last one, Lorraine said, her eyes scanning my body like she was inspecting a flawed piece of merchandise. If this is a European foundation, the standard is different. You need structure. You need tailoring. You need to look like you belong to the family. I frowned. Mom, it is a business meeting, not a runway show. It is all the same thing. She insisted. People judge you in the first 3 seconds. And frankly, darling, your wardrobe screams freelancer. I pulled my hands away. I am a freelancer. Tessa looked up, her expression a mix of pity and malice. Mom is right. Bella, I found some links for you. I sent them to your email. I checked my phone. Tessa had sent 5 links to dresses. They were all beautiful, expensive, and completely wrong for me. One was a backless red silk number that would have been appropriate for a casino, not a philanthropic board meeting. Another was a stiff tweed suit that would have made me look like I was cosplaying a British royal from the 1950s. Tessa, these are a lot, I said. They are statements, Tessa said, sipping her tea. If you want to be taken seriously, you have to make a splash, unless you want to fade into the wallpaper, which is your usual move, right? I looked at her. The envy was radiating off her in waves. Tessa was used to being the one with the connections. She was the one with the country club membership. The idea that I might have access to a room she couldn't enter was eating her alive. If I wore that red dress, I would look ridiculous. I would look like I was trying too hard. And Tessa knew it. She wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to set me up to fail. If I embarrassed myself, the order of the universe would be restored. Tessa the star, Bella the disaster. I think I will handle my own clothes, I said. Lorraine's smile faltered. We are just trying to support you. Bella, you have finally stumbled into something potentially useful. We want to make sure you don't ruin it. Useful. There it was. I have to go. I said, I have a trip to prepare for. A trip? Graham asked, walking into the kitchen at that exact moment. Where are you going? Virginia. I said, just for the weekend, to clear my head. Lorraine narrowed her eyes. Virginia? What is in Virginia? History. I said, the drive to Larkhaven took 6 hours. I left before dawn on Saturday. Watching the sunrise turn the highway from gray to gold. As I crossed the state line into Virginia, the landscape changed. The manicured suburbs gave way to rolling green hills and dense forests. Larkhaven was a small town tucked into a valley near the mountains. It had a main street lined with brick storefronts, a single traffic light, and a feeling of time moving slower than it did in Connecticut. I found the address from the yellow pad easily. It was a converted barn on the edge of town, painted a soft, weathered blue. A wooden sign out front read, The Larkhaven Community Arts Center. I parked my car and walked up the gravel path. The air was humid and smelled of honeysuckle. Inside, the center was bustling. There was a pottery class happening in one corner, children painting in another, and the sound of a cello drifting down from a loft. It was chaotic, messy, and vibrant, the opposite of the sterile, hushed luxury of my parents' world. I walked to the front desk. An older woman with wild gray curls and paint on her apron was answering the phone. Can I help you? Honey? She asked when she hung up. I'm looking for Renee. I said, I don't know if she still works here. My grandmother had her name. Renee Dallow? The woman smiled. She is in the back office. Just go through the gallery and knock on the door with the cat poster. I walked through the gallery space. The walls were covered in local art, watercolors of the mountains, charcoal sketches of coal miners, abstract quilts, and then I saw it. On the far wall, there was a bronze plaque listing the founding benefactors, the Larkhaven Restoration Project, made possible by the generosity of the Miller family doctor, S. Patel Elaine Archer. I stopped. There it was. My grandmother's name, carved in metal, hundreds of miles from the kitchen where she used to make pot roast. I knocked on the office door. "Come in," a voice called. I opened the door. The office was small and cluttered, stacked high with flyers and fabric swatches. A woman in her late 60s sat behind a desk, typing on a laptop. She looked up, adjusting her glasses. "Hi," I said. "I am sorry to disturb you. My name is Bella Coleman. I am Elaine Archer's granddaughter." The woman froze. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face. "My God," she whispered. "You have her chin." She stood up and came around the desk, wrapping me in a hug that smelled of lavender and dust. It was shocking. My family didn't hug like this. My family hugged with air kisses and stiff shoulders. This woman held me like I was a returned soldier. "Elaine's granddaughter," she said, pulling back to look at me. "We thought we'd never see anyone from the family. Elaine always said you were all distinct. She was very private." I said. Renee laughed. She went back to her desk and motioned for me to sit. Private is one word for it. She was a vault. But she saved this place. You know. She pointed to the window, encompassing the building and the grounds. "How?" I asked. "The plaque says she was a benefactor. But she didn't have that kind of money. My grandfather controlled the accounts." Renee shook her head. "Oh, honey, it wasn't about the money. I mean, she gave what she could. But 20 years ago, this land was slated to be a strip mall. A developer from D.C. had the mayor in his pocket. They were going to bulldoze the barn and pave over the creek." She leaned forward. Everyone in town was screaming at town hall meetings, yelling, making signs, getting arrested. It didn't do a thing. The developer had the lawyers. But Elaine? Elaine came down here for the summer. She didn't yell. She went to the county clerk's office and spent 3 weeks in the basement reading zoning archives from 1920. "She found something?" I asked. "She found a watershed covenant," Renee said, grinning. "A forgotten bylaw that said no commercial pavement could be laid within 50 yards of the creek because of a rare salamander habitat. She didn't sue them. She just photocopied the document, highlighted the paragraph, and mailed it to the developer's insurance company. They pulled the funding the next day. Too much liability." I stared at her. My grandmother. The silent assassin. She beat them with paperwork. I said, "She beat them with patience," Renee corrected. "She sat in that basement when everyone else was out holding picket signs. She knew that the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the least power." Renee reached into a drawer and pulled out a photo. It was a Polaroid. It showed my grandmother, 20 years younger, sitting on the steps of this barn, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, laughing with a group of people I didn't know. She looked younger, lighter, freer than I had ever seen her. "She loved this place," Renee said softly. "She used to talk about you." "Me?" I asked. "I was just a kid then." "She talked about all the grandkids," Renee said. "But she worried about you. She said the others were loud. That sister of yours. And the parents. She said they were always performing, but she said Bella. Bella is the one who listens." My throat went tight. "She told me once," Renee continued, looking at the photo. She said, "Bella sees things the others miss because she isn't busy trying to be the center of attention. One day, that girl is going to be dangerous." Tears pricked my eyes. I wiped them away quickly. "Dangerous," I repeated, in the best way. Renee said, I spent the rest of the afternoon walking the grounds with Renee. She showed me the creek Elaine had saved. She showed me the garden Elaine had planted. I realized that my grandmother hadn't just been hiding a job. She had been hiding an entire personality. She had been a warrior in a cardigan, and she had seen me, even when I felt invisible at the dinner table, drowning in the noise of Tessa's achievements and my mother's critiques. Elaine had been watching. She had valued the very thing my parents despised, my silence. I drove back to Connecticut on Sunday night. The dread of returning to Westbridge was heavy, but underneath it was a new sensation. Steel. I felt like I had a spine made of the same stuff Elaine had used to fight that developer. I got to my parents' house around 10 o'clock. I had left a box of winter clothes there during my last move, and I needed my heavy coat for the New York trip. It was a flimsy excuse, but I needed to retrieve it. The house was dark, except for a light in the study. I let myself in quietly. I had my key. The habit of being invisible served me well. I closed the front door without a sound. I walked toward the study to say hello, but stopped when I heard my father's voice. He was on the phone, and he sounded agitated. I know, Lorraine, but it is getting out of hand. I just got off the phone with Bill Henderson from the club. He asked me if Bella was working for the Alderbrook. There was a pause. I stood in the hallway. My breath held. Yes, I know we denied it, Graham hissed. I told him it was a mix-up. I told him she was just volunteering for a library thing. But if she actually goes to this meeting on Tuesday, people are going to see her. The list of attendees isn't public, but people talk. He paced across the room. I could hear his footsteps on the hardwood. We should have stopped this 20 years ago when Elaine first brought it up. He said, I told you then, Lorraine, I told you that women's connections were going to be a problem. We worked too hard to get into the Juniper Circle to have it blown up by some European weirdness. It makes us look like we have secrets. It makes us look unstable. I stepped back, my hand covering my mouth. It wasn't just that they didn't know. They did know. Graham continued. Look, if Bella gets involved, she's going to find out about the money Elaine offered us. The endowment she wanted to set up for the girls. We turned it down because of the strings attached. Remember? We didn't want the oversight. We didn't want the foundation auditing our lives. My knees felt weak. Elaine had offered them money? An endowment? And they had refused it because they didn't want oversight? They didn't want anyone looking too closely at their perfect suburban performance. Graham sighed. I will talk to her in the morning. I will tell her the foundation is under investigation or something. Scaring her is the only way. She's fragile. She'll believe it. The rage that hit me was so sudden and so hot, it almost blinded me. She's fragile. I didn't leave. I didn't sneak out. I walked into the study. Graham spun around, dropping the phone on the desk. His face went pale. Bella, he stammered, I didn't hear you come in. Clearly, I said. My voice was low, shaking, but not with fear, with fury. How much did you hear? He asked, his eyes darting to the door as if looking for Lorraine to save him. Enough, I said. I heard you say you turned down an endowment from Grandma Elaine. I heard you say you didn't want oversight, and I heard you say you were planning to lie to me to scare me out of this. Graham straightened his jacket, trying to regain his patriarchal authority. It crumbled instantly. You don't understand the context. Bella, your grandmother, she was involved in things that were not normal. We wanted to protect you girls. We wanted a normal life for you. You wanted a controlled life, I snapped. You didn't want Elaine's help because it came with accountability. You couldn't charm a foundation audit like you charm your friends at the country club. Graham's face hardened. It would have been a spectacle. He said, Do you know what people would say if they knew your grandmother was funneling money to European royals? They would think we were weird. They would think we were putting on airs. We have a standing in this community. Bella, we have a reputation. A reputation built on what? I asked. On debt? On pretending to be richer than you are? On making Tessa feel like a princess and me feel like a failure? That is not fair. Graham said. You called me fragile. I said, stepping closer, you think I am weak because I don't shout like Tessa. You think I am a failure because I don't measure my worth in memberships. I am your father, Bella. I know what is best for you. This world, this Alderbrook world. It will chew you up. You are not cut out for it. You are too soft. I thought about the salamander. I thought about the zoning laws. I thought of Elaine sitting in a basement for 3 weeks, silent and lethal. You are wrong, I said. I picked up the box of clothes I had come for. I am going to that meeting on Tuesday. Dad, Bella, I forbid it. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. You don't get to forbid anything anymore. I am 32 years old. And I am not the daughter you think I am. I am Elaine's granddaughter. I turned to the door. And one more thing, I said, looking back at him. Tell Mom to stop sending me dress links. I'll wear what I want. I walked out of the house. Lorraine was coming down the stairs in her silk robe, looking confused. Bella? What is going on? Graham? I didn't stop. I walked past her, out the front door, and into the night air. The gravel crunched under my boots, the same sound that had always made me feel judged. But tonight, it just sounded like rocks. I got into my car and slammed the door. My hands were shaking, but not from nerves. I felt light. I felt clear. For the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering if I was doing the right thing. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I drove away from the colonial house, away from the manicured lawn, away from the lies they had told to keep themselves comfortable. Tuesday was coming, and I was going to be ready. The second event was not a party. There were no waiters passing trays of champagne, no string quartet, and definitely no photographers. It was held in a conference room on the 4th floor of the Alderbrook townhouse, a space that smelled of lemon oil and serious intention. I sat at a long mahogany table with 5 other people. To my left was a retired appellate judge. To my right was a structural engineer who specialized in restoring medieval masonry. At the head of the table sat Marion Voss, looking less like a hostess and more like a general commanding a war room. The agenda for the evening was a single item: the Briarholt City Preservation Initiative. I had spent the last 3 days studying the briefing dossier Marion had sent via secure courier. Briarholt City was a fictional composite of every struggling industrial town in the Rust Belt, a place where the factories had closed 20 years ago, leaving behind a hollowed-out economy and a surplus of beautiful, crumbling Victorian architecture. The proposal on the table was a partnership. A local developer wanted to turn the old textile mill into a mixed-use complex, affordable housing, artist studios, and a community clinic. They were asking the foundation for a grant to restore the clock tower and the main facade, citing historical integrity. It looked straightforward. The engineer said, tapping a blueprint, "The structure is sound. The budget is realistic. It is not straightforward." I said. The room went quiet. The judge turned to look at me. "Ms. Coleman?" Marion asked. I opened my folder. My hands were sweating, but I kept them flat on the table. I looked into the developer's background. I said, not just the company name on the proposal, but the subsidiaries. The primary contractor listed for the housing units has a history of evicting tenants in other cities once the tax credits expire. They flip the buildings to market rate within 5 years. I slid a printed spreadsheet toward the center of the table. If Alderbrook funds this restoration, we are putting our seal of approval on a project that might displace the very community it claims to serve. The grant is for the clock tower. Yes, but the clock tower is the branding they will use to sell luxury condos in 2031. The judge picked up the spreadsheet. He adjusted his spectacles. "This data is from the municipal archives in Ohio," he noted. "How did you find this?" "I used to edit legal journals." I said, "I know how to read the fine print in public filings." Marion did not smile, but she gave a single, curt nod. "The proposal is tabled pending further investigation into tenant protections," she announced. "Good catch, Ms. Coleman." The meeting continued for another 2 hours. We debated zoning laws, labor unions, and the ethics of architectural salvage. By the time we finished, my brain felt like it had been run a marathon. This was not a social club. This was work. Every decision made in this room had a blast radius. A yes meant jobs. A no meant a building might collapse. A mistake meant a neighborhood could be gentrified out of existence. As I packed my bag, the weight of it settled on my shoulders. I was not just Elaine's granddaughter here. I was a gatekeeper. I felt a wave of imposter syndrome so sharp it almost made me dizzy. Who was I to make these calls? I was a copy editor who lived in a drafty apartment. I bought my groceries with coupons, and here I was, debating the fate of millions of dollars, but I had shown up. I had done the reading, and I had stopped a bad deal. Marion caught me as I was heading for the elevator. "Bella," a word. She ushered me into her office and closed the door. The room was dim, lit only by a banker's lamp on her desk. "You did well today," she said. "The judge is not easily impressed. I just read the files." I said, "That is more than most people do," she replied. "But that is not why I pulled you aside." She walked behind her desk and picked up a file. It was thin, marked with a red tab. "We have a security protocol regarding our archives," she said. "Access to donor records is strictly monitored. Yesterday, our system flagged an inquiry." "An inquiry?" "Someone has been asking questions about the Archer file," she said, specifically. "Elaine's activity between 1980 and 1990. My stomach tightened. "Who?" "We are not sure yet," Marion said. "The inquiry came through a secondary channel, a law firm that represents several of our donors. They claimed they were doing due diligence for a biography project, but that is a lie. There is no biography project." She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "Whoever it is, they have access to the outer circles of this world, and they are looking for dirt. They want to know where the money went. They want to know if Elaine was taking a cut." "Was she?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Marion's eyes flashed. "Never. Elaine was impeccable, but looking for dirt and finding it are two different things. If someone wants to reshape her legacy to hurt you, they do not need facts. They just need suspicion." She handed me a card with a direct line. "If anyone approaches you, a journalist, a lawyer, a long-lost cousin, you call me. Do not engage. Do not defend. You call me." I took the card. "Is it my family?" I asked. Marion paused. "I do not know, Bella. But in my experience, the call usually comes from inside the house." I took the train back to Westbridge the next day. I needed to pick up the rest of my winter clothes, but mostly, I needed to look my mother in the eye. The house was quiet when I arrived. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Lorraine should have been at her garden club. Tessa should have been at her Pilates class. Instead, they were both in the living room. Lorraine was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a bridal magazine. Tessa was on the floor, surrounded by fabric swatches. "Oh, good. You are here," Lorraine said, as if I had been summoned. I stood in the doorway, my bag slung over my shoulder. "What is going on?" I asked. "Is Tessa getting married?" Tessa laughed. "No, not yet. We are just planning the aesthetic. You have to be ready." Lorraine patted the cushion beside her. "Sit down, Bella. We need to discuss the calendar." I did not sit. I have a lot to do. "Mom, I just came for my boots. The foundation has another reception next month," Lorraine said, ignoring my refusal. "The spring equinox gathering. I heard about it from Mrs. Vance, who heard it from a friend in Greenwich." I said nothing. "It is a larger event," Lorraine continued. "Spouses and family included. It is not confirmed." I said, "Oh, it is confirmed," Lorraine said breezily. "And since you are now on the— what is it? The steering committee? Since you are on the committee, you will obviously have an invitation." I looked at her. I saw the hunger in her eyes. It wasn't just about social climbing anymore. It was about ownership. She wanted to own my success so she could frame it on her wall. "I will have an invitation," I said carefully. "For me?" Lorraine's smile didn't waver, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "And your guest," she said, "which will be your sister." I looked at Tessa. She was studying a piece of lace, pretending not to listen, but her posture was stiff. "No," I said. Lorraine blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no. I repeated, "I am not bringing Tessa." Tessa dropped the lace. "Why not?" she demanded. "Are you ashamed of me?" "It is not a party." "Tessa," I said, "it is work. I am there to work. I can't be babysitting you while you try to network with people who are trying to discuss architectural preservation." "I don't need babysitting," Tessa shouted. "I am a member of Juniper Ridge. I know how to handle myself. You are just being a gatekeeper. You want to keep it all to yourself because it is the only thing you have ever had that I didn't get first." That was true enough to sting. But I didn't flinch. "It is not appropriate," I said, "and frankly, After the way you two have treated me for the last 10 years, mocking my job, my clothes, my life, I don't see why I should hand you access to the one thing I built on my own." Lorraine stood up. The magazine slid to the floor. "You didn't build it," she snapped. "You inherited it. You got lucky because your grandmother had a secret hobby. Do not confuse nepotism with talent." "Bella." I felt the blood rush to my face. "And do not confuse leverage with love," I countered. Lorraine took a step toward me. Her face was twisted in a way I rarely saw, the mask of the perfect hostess slipping to reveal the jagged edges underneath. "We raised you," she hissed. "We paid for your college. We paid for your braces. We supported you when you quit your big marketing job to become a typist. You owe us, Bella. You owe this family your loyalty. If you have a key to a door, you open it for your sister. That is the rule." I looked at her. I really looked at her. For years, I had thought my mother's love was just hard to earn. I thought if I achieved enough, or looked pretty enough, or married well enough, I would finally get the version of her that Tessa got. But standing there, I realized the truth. Her love wasn't hard to earn. It was a transaction. It was a currency she traded for status. And right now, I was refusing to pay the tax. "I don't owe you my dignity," I said quietly. "And I don't owe you access to people who value me for who I am, not who I can introduce them to." "You are selfish," Tessa spat. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe I'm just done being your prop." I turned and walked out. I didn't get my boots. I didn't care about the boots. I drove back to my apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I felt hollowed out. Confronting them didn't feel like victory. It felt like amputation. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Tessa_C has posted to her story. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was bait, but I tapped the screen anyway. The image was a selfie of Tessa, looking glamorous and mysterious, holding a glass of wine. The caption was typed in a playful, cursive font. "Big things coming for the Coleman girls. So excited to announce that our family is stepping onto the global stage. European summers. Here we come. Legacy royalty. Secret projects." My heart stopped. She hadn't named the foundation. She hadn't named me. But she had used the words royalty and legacy, and she had tagged it secret projects in Westbridge. That was enough. The rumor mill would take those 3 hashtags and spin them into a scandal before breakfast. I dialed Tessa's number. She sent me to voicemail. I texted her. "Take it down. Now." 3 dots appeared, then stopped, then appeared again. "Why? Are you afraid of a little hype?" "I didn't even mention your boring foundation. You are implying a connection you don't have." I typed back. "It is unprofessional, and it puts me in a bad position." "You put yourself in a bad position when you decided to cut me out." She replied, "If you won't tell the story, I will. People are already asking me what is going on. I am just controlling the narrative. Isn't that what you like to do?" She was framing me as controlling. She was making herself the victim of a secretive, jealous sister. I stared at the phone. I could report the post, but that would look petty. I could comment on it, but that would validate it. Tessa had launched a flare, and she was waiting to see who would look up. I didn't reply. I blocked her from seeing my story. Though I posted nothing, it was a small, useless gesture. The damage was already seeping into the groundwater. I needed to work. Work was the only thing that felt clean. I opened the secure portal for the committee and pulled up the next batch of files Marion had assigned me. I was expecting more architectural proposals or grant requests for symphonies. Instead, I found a folder labeled Initiative 12B, Confidential Support Services. I opened it. The documents described a program I had never heard of. It was a fund dedicated to providing mental health care and legal support for high-pressure caretaking professions, nurses, social workers, public defenders, and hospice staff. But it wasn't just a check-writing operation. The foundation paid for therapy, for sabbaticals, for legal defense in malpractice suits where the practitioner was being scapegoated, And the most important part? It was anonymous. The recipients didn't know the money came from a royal foundation. They just knew their bills were paid. The foundation didn't want the credit. They didn't want the recipients to feel indebted to a patron. They wanted the help to feel like a right, not a gift. I read a memo written by Elaine in 1992. The dignity of the caretaker is the foundation of a civil society. If we make them dance for their supper, we degrade the service they provide. The support must be silent, or it is not support. It is advertising. I sat back in my chair. This was why the secrecy mattered. It wasn't about being exclusive. It wasn't about keeping people like my parents out. It was about protecting the integrity of the gift. If Lorraine knew about this, she would tell the world. She would want the nurses to write thank you notes. She would want a plaque with our name on it in the hospital wing. She would turn the silence into noise. I understood Elaine more in that moment than I ever had. She hadn't hidden this life because she was ashamed. She had hidden it because she honored it. The following week, Marion called me to the townhouse for a private meeting. When I arrived, Marion was not alone. Sitting in the leather wingback chair was a man I had only seen in the briefing documents, Sir Alton Wexley. He was the chair of the European Board. He was in his late 70s, with a face that looked like a map of difficult terrain. He wore a suit that was impeccably tailored but looked lived in. He held a cane with a silver handle, but he didn't lean on it, Miss Coleman. He said, his voice was deep, gravelly, and carried an accent that was vaguely British but smoothed by years of international travel. Sir Alton, I said, bowing my head slightly. Sit, he commanded. I sat. Marion stood by the window, watching. I have been reading your reports, Sir Alton said. You have a sharp eye for detail. The Briarholt matter. That was well handled. Thank you, I said. But competence is common, he said, waving a hand. I can hire competence. I can hire a dozen lawyers from Harvard who can read a contract better than you. I stiffened. What is rare? He continued, leaning forward. Is motive. He stared at me. His eyes were pale blue and uncomfortably direct. Why are you here, Miss Coleman? I want to help. I started. He banged his cane on the floor. Rubbish. Everyone wants to help. It makes them feel virtuous. Try again. I paused. I thought about the royal connection. I thought about the status. Is it the title? He asked. Does it make you feel important to be associated with a crown, however distant? Does it make up for the mediocrity of your suburban existence? The insult landed hard. I felt a flash of anger. No, I said sharply. Then what? He pressed. Why do you get on a train and come here and read boring files about zoning laws? What is the hunger? I looked at him. I could lie. I could give him a prepared speech about legacy, but I remembered Elaine's note. Not all doors open for the loudest. I am tired of being small. I said. Sir Alton stopped. He tilted his head. Explain. My whole life, I said, my voice steady. I have been told that I am a supporting character. I was told to be quiet, to be grateful, to let the people with the loud voices and the big checkbooks take up all the space. I was told that my value was in how well I could facilitate their happiness. I gripped the arms of the chair. I am here because this work is big. It matters. And for the first time, I am the one making the decision. I am not the prop. I am not the audience. I am the one holding the pen. I want to be here because this is the only place where being quiet is a strength, not a failure. Sir Alton stared at me for a long time. The clock on the mantel ticked. Then, slowly, a smile cracked his granite face. Honesty. He murmured. How refreshing. He looked at Marion. She will do. He stood up. Using the cane this time. Keep her close. Marion. She has the fire. He walked past me, pausing just for a second to tap my shoulder with a finger. But be careful. Miss Coleman, fire burns both ways. He left the room. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Marion walked over to the desk and sat down. She looked pleased. He likes you, she said. That is rare. She opened a drawer and pulled out a contract, which brings us to the next step. She slid the document toward me. The committee wants to offer you a position, a consulting role. It is temporary. 6 months to start. You would be a liaison for our domestic projects. I looked at the contract. There was a salary, a real salary. It was more than I made in a year of freelancing, but there were conditions. Clause 4. Strict confidentiality, no public disclosure of role. Clause 7. Availability for travel upon 24-hour notice. Clause 9. Recusal from all other political or social board memberships. It would stabilize my life. I could pay off my student loans. I could move to a better apartment. I could finally stop worrying about the price of gas. But I would belong to them. Marian watched me read. "It is a cage," Marian said softly. "But it is a gilded one, and the key is on the inside." I hesitated. I wanted the independence. I wanted the money. But I remembered the feeling of my father telling me what to do. I remembered the feeling of Lorraine scripting my life. If I signed this, I would be trading one set of rules for another. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "You have 24 hours, Marian said. I returned to Westbridge feeling the weight of the contract in my bag. I needed to clear my head before I made a decision. I decided to stop at the grocery store, a mundane task to ground myself. I was in the produce aisle, squeezing avocados, when I heard a voice. "Bella?" I turned. It was a woman I knew from high school. Sarah. She was wearing a tennis skirt and a visor. "Sarah, hi," I said. She smiled, but her eyes were darting over my face, looking for something. "I saw Tessa's post," she said, leaning in. "Is it true?" "Is what true?" I asked. "The rumor," she whispered. "Everyone at the club is talking about it. Mrs. Vance told my mom that you are dating a European prince. I almost dropped the avocado." "What?" I said. Sarah giggled. "Don't play coy. They said you have been going into the city for secret meetings. And Tessa posted about royalty. Come on, Bella. Who is he? Is he handsome? Or is he one of those old, dusty ones with a castle?" I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just a rumor about a job. It was a romantic smear. If people thought I was chasing a prince, everything I did would be viewed through that lens. My work, my trips, my silence. It would all be reinterpreted as the desperate maneuvering of a gold digger. It delegitimized me instantly. It made me a joke. I am not dating anyone. "Sarah," I said coldly. "I am working." Sarah winked. "Sure, working. That is what they all say." She patted my arm. "Good for you. Though, get that bag." She walked away, leaving me standing next to the avocados, shaking with rage. This was Tessa. This was Lorraine. They couldn't understand a world where a woman went to a meeting for a purpose other than finding a husband. So they had rewritten my story to fit their script. And if I didn't stop it, that script would become the truth. I left the store. I didn't buy the avocados. I sat in my car in the parking lot. I looked at the contract in my bag. Marian had said the only way to survive was to control the narrative. I took out my phone. I opened the contract again. I wasn't going to let them turn me into a punchline. I wasn't going to let them reduce Elaine's legacy to a tabloid romance. I needed the power. I needed the legitimacy. I pulled a pen from my purse. I signed the contract. Then, I started the car. If they wanted a story, I would give them one, but it wasn't going to be the one they expected. The contract I signed with the Alderbrook Foundation was for 6 months, but the transformation happened in the first 6 days. I became a commuter between 2 distinct realities. In Westbridge, I was still Bella the disappointment, the daughter who drove a 5-year-old sedan and lived in a drafty apartment, but on the train to New York and within the limestone walls of the foundation. I was Ms. Coleman, a consultant with a security clearance and a vote that mattered. The dichotomy was disorienting at first, but soon it became my armor. When Lorraine made a passive-aggressive comment about my hair, I didn't flinch because I knew that 3 hours earlier, I had been discussing the preservation of a 12th century archive with a diplomat. The secret didn't make me feel superior. It made me feel untouchable. I worked quietly. I reviewed grant proposals. I drafted correspondence. And I learned the specific, silent language of philanthropy. I learned that "we will take it under advisement" meant no, and a matter of some sensitivity meant a scandal was brewing. And a scandal was definitely brewing. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in late March. I was in the small office Marion had assigned to me, organizing a file on the Briarholt City Initiative. The project was moving forward, a massive revitalization effort for a depressed industrial town. Funded by a coalition of anonymous donors organized by Alderbrook, it was good work, clean work. Then Marion's assistant knocked on my door. Her face was pale. "Ms. Voss needs you in the secure conference room," she said. "Now?" I left my coffee and followed her. The conference room felt like a vacuum. The air was still. Marion sat at the head of the table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Sir Alton Wexley was there, too, looking like a thundercloud in a bespoke suit. "Sit down, Bella," Marion said. I sat. "We have received a communication," Sir Alton said. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a photocopy of a letter. The text was cut and pasted from magazines. A cliché that made it feel even more menacing, like the sender was mocking the very idea of a threat. To the committee. "We know the identity of the primary donor for the Briarholt grant. We know about the offshore routing. We know about the tax implications. Unless the grant is redirected to the Jupiter Development Group by Friday, we will release the donor's name to the press. We will frame it as foreign interference in American policy." I read it twice. "This is blackmail," I said. "It is leverage," Sir Alton corrected. "The Jupiter Development Group is the contractor we rejected last month, the one you flagged for tenant evictions. They want the contract back." I said, "And they are willing to burn the donor to get it." "Who is the donor?" I asked. Marion looked at Sir Alton. He nodded. "It is the Grand Duchess of Luxembourg." Marion said, "Through a private trust. If her name is attached to a political scandal in an American swing state, the diplomatic fallout would be catastrophic. She would be forced to withdraw all funding, not just from Briarholt, but from every project in the United States. So we are stuck," I said. "If we pay them, we compromise the project's integrity. If we don't, we lose the funding." "Precisely," Sir Alton said. "We need a response strategy, and we cannot use our usual legal team." "Why not?" I asked. "Because we suspect the leak came from inside our perimeter." Marion said, "Someone knew the donor's identity. That information is limited to the Senior Steering Committee and our legal counsel." I looked at the letter again. "Why am I here?" I asked. "I am a provisional consultant, because you are the only one who is not entangled." Sir Alton said, "You have been here 6 weeks. You have no history with these lawyers. You have no alliances. We need you to draft the response, and we need you to look at the leak from the outside." I felt a cold prickle of fear, followed by the familiar heat of determination. "I need the files." I said, "I need to see every person who had access to the Briarholt dossier in the last 30 days. I took the files home to New Haven. I didn't trust the office. I didn't trust the train Wi-Fi. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by redacted logs and email chains. Channeling Elaine Archer, Patience. She had written, "The loudest person is usually the one with the least power." I looked for noise. The Jupiter Development Group was a shell company. That was obvious. But who was pulling the strings? I cross-referenced their board members with our vendor list. Nothing. Then I looked at the timeline. The Briarholt decision was made on February 14th. The rejection letter went out on February 16th. The threat arrived on March 24th. Why the gap? Why wait 5 weeks? I looked at the reputation services firms that Alderbrook had employed in the past. It was standard practice to hire consultants to vet potential partners. We had used 3 firms in the last year. One of them caught my eye. Hartley Strategic Solutions. Hartley. I stopped breathing for a second. It was a common name. There were thousands of Hartleys. I opened my laptop and went to the Public Business Registry. I searched for Hartley Strategic Solutions. Principal Partners. Thomas J. Hartley. William Hartley. I searched for Thomas J. Hartley. I found an obituary from 5 years ago. I searched for William Hartley. I found a LinkedIn profile. William Hartley, Managing Director, Hartley Strategic Solutions, based in Greenwich, Connecticut. I clicked on the profile. I scrolled down to Connections, and there he was. Miles Hartley, Associate Wealth Manager, son. My stomach dropped. Miles, Tessa's boyfriend, the man who had just joined Juniper Ridge Country Club. I dug deeper. I looked at the firm's recent activity. Hartley Strategic Solutions had pitched a crisis management retainer to the Alderbrook Foundation 6 months ago. They had been rejected by Marion, who found their fees excessive and their methods aggressive. I looked at the threat letter again. We will frame it as foreign interference. That wasn't the language of a disgruntled construction worker. That was the language of a crisis management firm creating a crisis so they could be hired to manage it. They weren't just trying to get the construction contract. They were trying to force Alderbrook into a panic so we would hire them to fix the leak they had created. And how did they get the intel? I thought about the brunch. I thought about the royal invitation lying on the table. I thought about Tessa's social media post. Big things coming. Legacy. Royalty. Miles was smart. He worked in wealth management. If Tessa had mentioned even a fraction of what she knew, that I was working with a European foundation, that there were royal ties, Miles could have put the pieces together. He could have asked his father to look into it, and if his father's firm had previous dealings with Alderbrook, they would know exactly where to apply pressure. It wasn't a direct leak from our files. It was a triangulation. They had used my family's loose lips to confirm a target they were already watching. I felt sick. My family wasn't just embarrassing me. They were actively endangering the work. I needed to be sure. I couldn't go to Marion with a hunch based on my sister's boyfriend's dad. I needed confirmation. I created a burner email account. I drafted a message to Hartley Strategic Solutions. Posing as a disgruntled former employee of a rival developer, I wrote, I have information regarding the Briarholt bid. I know you represent the Jupiter Group's interests. I waited. 3 hours later, I got a reply. We are interested. Call this number. The number was a direct line to the Greenwich office. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a thread strong enough to hang them. I didn't call Marion immediately. I had to handle the source of the infection first. I texted Tessa, meet me for coffee, Starbucks on Main, alone. It is an emergency. She replied instantly. Is Mom okay? Mom is fine. This is about you. She arrived 20 minutes later, wearing oversized sunglasses and a tracksuit that cost more than my monthly rent. She looked annoyed, but underneath the annoyance, I saw a flicker of anxiety. What is this about? She asked, sitting down without ordering. I have a nail appointment in half an hour. Put the phone away. Tessa, I said. She rolled her eyes but dropped her phone into her bag. You are so dramatic lately. Ever since you got this little job, you act like you are in the CIA. I leaned forward. I know about Miles's father. I said. Tessa froze. Her face went blank. What? I know that William Hartley runs a firm called Hartley Strategic Solutions. I said, I know that they pitched services to my employer last year, and I know that they are currently trying to blackmail the foundation using information that could have only come from someone who has been listening to my private conversations. Tessa's mouth opened, then closed. She looked genuinely confused, then defensive. You are crazy, she said. Miles doesn't know anything about your job. I never told him anything. You posted about royalty on Instagram. Tessa, you hashtagged secret projects. Do you think people like the Hartleys don't have Google alerts set up? Tessa scoffed. It was just a caption. Bella, it is called branding. It is called exposure. I snapped. And right now, there is a very real chance that Miles and his family are using you to get to me, to get to the money I help manage. Tessa slammed her hand on the table. How dare you, she hissed. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous. Miles loves me. His family loves me. They treat me like a daughter. They treat you like an asset. I said, keeping my voice low. Just like Mom treats you like an asset. They are using you to get proximity to influence. Stop it, she cried. People turned to look. She lowered her voice, her eyes filling with angry tears. You are trying to ruin this for me. You can't stand that I am happy. You can't stand that I am in the club and you are not. I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the rage. She was terrified that I was right. She was terrified that her perfect boyfriend, her perfect life, was a construct. If she admitted that Miles was using her, she would have to admit that her value was conditional. Tessa, I said softer, I am not trying to hurt you. I am trying to warn you. If this investigation goes public, Miles's family is going to be named, and if you are connected to it, I don't believe you, she said. Standing up, Miles is a good man. He is a legacy member at Juniper Ridge. He doesn't need your stupid foundation money. She grabbed her bag. Don't talk to me about this again. And stay away from Miles. She stormed out. I watched her go. I felt a heavy, dull sadness. She was trapped. She was so addicted to the image of success that she would defend the people who were exploiting her just to keep the picture frame intact. I went to my parents' house next. I had to close the loop. Lorraine was in the sunroom, repotting an orchid. She looked up when I entered, her face arranging itself into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Bella, to what do we owe the pleasure? Did you bring the invitation? I stood by the door. We need to talk about the gala. I said. Lorraine dusted her hands off. Finally, I have been telling Mrs. Vance that we are just waiting on the details. I was thinking Tessa could wear emerald. It brings out her eyes. There is no invitation for Tessa. I said. Lorraine stopped. The room went silent. We discussed this. Bella, this is a family event. It is a professional event. I said, and considering the rumors circulating at your club, the ones about me chasing a prince, I don't think it is appropriate for the family to attend. Lorraine's face hardened. Those are just silly rumors. People are jealous. If you bring Tessa, it proves them wrong. It shows we are united. It shows we are desperate. I said. Lorraine walked over to me. She was shorter than me, but she knew how to loom. Let us be clear. Bella, you are in a position to help your sister. Miles has been distant lately. Tessa thinks he is stressed about work. If she can show up at this gala, with VIP access, it cements her status. It secures her engagement. I stared at her. You want me to use my job to help Tessa secure a ring? I want you to be a sister, Lorraine said. What is the point of you having all this access if you don't share it? You are hoarding it. It is selfish. I felt a clarity so sharp it cut. You only value what you can show. I said, excuse me? You don't care about the work I do. I said, you don't care about the history we preserve or the people we help. You only care about the invitation because it is a piece of paper you can wave in front of your friends to prove you matter. That is how the world works. Bella, Lorraine shouted, perception is reality. If you are not seen, you don't exist. I exist, I said. I exist in rooms you will never enter. And I am not opening the door for you. Lorraine's face turned an ugly shade of red. If you walk out of here without that invitation, don't expect us to be there when you fall. And you will fall. Bella, you always do. You are not strong enough for this world. I turned around. I guess we will see, I said. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. It felt final. I took the train back to the city that night. I went straight to the townhouse. It was 9 o'clock. Marion was still in her office. She looked up when I walked in. I have the answer, I said. I laid out the findings. The link between Tessa, Miles, and Hartley Strategic Solutions. The timing of the leak. The motive. Marion listened in silence. When I finished, she took off her glasses. You are telling me that your sister's boyfriend is blackmailing us. She said, his family is. I said, and he is the conduit. Marion sighed. She rubbed her temples. This confirms our suspicions about the internal leak. It wasn't technological, it was social. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. You know what this means, Bella. We have to go on the offensive. We have to expose Hartley, and that means exposing the link to your sister. It will be public. It will be messy. I know, I said. Your family will not forgive you, she said. They will say you betrayed them to save yourself. They already say that. I said. Marion stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the dark street, this world, it demands a price. Bella, you can have the approval of the people you love, or you can have the respect of the people you lead. Rarely both. I choose the work. I said. Marion nodded. Good, because there is one more thing. She walked to a safe in the corner of the room. She dialed in the combination and pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger. Elaine left a final instruction. She said, a failsafe. She opened the book to a marked page. It was a handwritten letter from Elaine, dated 3 days before she died. To the committee. My family is accustomed to using people as resources. If the day comes when they attempt to exploit my seat for social or financial gain, I invoke the protocol of redirect. Any honorarium, benefit, or access that would have been granted to the Coleman family must be immediately liquidated and redirected to the Community Defense Fund. They are to receive nothing but the truth. I stared at the handwriting. The Community Defense Fund, that was the anonymous mental health initiative. She knew. I whispered. She knew they would try to sell tickets to her funeral. She knew them. Marion said, and she knew you. She left you the sword. Bella, now you have to swing it. The next day, we executed the response. We didn't pay the blackmail. Instead, Sir Alton had a quiet lunch with the editor of a major financial newspaper. He leaked the story of the blackmail attempt itself, redaction the donor's name, but fully naming Hartley Strategic Solutions as the firm under investigation for corporate espionage and extortion. By Friday, the story broke. Consulting firm linked to blackmail scheme in charity sector. The article didn't mention the Alderbrook Foundation by name. It referred to a prominent European heritage trust, but it named William Hartley. It mentioned his son, Miles Hartley. As a person of interest in the information gathering, the fallout was immediate. Hartley Strategic Solutions lost 3 major contracts by noon. The police opened an inquiry, and in Westbridge, the house of cards collapsed. I didn't answer my phone. I watched the calls come in. Mom, Tessa, Dad, Mom again. I listened to one voicemail from Tessa. She was sobbing. How could you? Miles is ruined. He says it is your fault. He says you set him up. Everyone at the club is talking. You destroyed us. I deleted the message. I didn't destroy them. I just turned on the lights. The Briarholt Gala was 2 weeks later. It was held in the restored textile mill, a soaring space of brick and glass. The clock tower, now fully funded and secure, glowed against the night sky. There were 300 guests, senators, artists, philanthropists. I wore a dress I had bought myself, a deep midnight blue velvet, high-necked, long-sleeved. It was severe and elegant. It didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. I arrived alone. I walked the red carpet not as a guest, but as a host. I greeted the mayor. I checked the seating arrangements. I spoke to the security team. At 8 o'clock, the speeches began. Sir Alton took the stage. He spoke about history. He spoke about the responsibility of memory. And then, he paused. Tonight, we also honor a legacy that has been silent for too long. He said. He looked out into the crowd. For 40 years, Elaine Archer served this foundation in the shadows. She asked for no credit. She asked only that the work continue. Tonight, we are joined by her granddaughter, who has stepped into that breach with a courage that rivals her grandmother's. He gestured to where I stood near the stage. Please welcome Ms. Bella Coleman, the new Director of Domestic Initiatives. The room applauded. It wasn't the polite, scattered applause of a country club brunch. It was a wave of sound. I stepped into the light. I didn't look for my parents in the crowd. They weren't there. I looked at Marion, who was standing in the wings, smiling. I walked to the microphone. My hands didn't shake. Thank you, I said. The voice that came out of the speakers was clear. It was my voice. I am here to talk about the work. I began. And for the first time in 32 years, everyone listened. The evening of the Briarholt City Gala did not feel like a celebration. It felt like a deployment. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, smoothing the fabric of my dress. It was a navy silk column, unadorned, with long sleeves and a high neck. It was the antithesis of the glittering, sequined armor my mother would have chosen for me. Lorraine would have wanted me to look like a prize. I wanted to look like a professional. I pulled my hair back into a low, severe bun and secured it with a single pin. No diamond earrings, no statement necklace, just me. I took a breath, holding it in my chest until my lungs burned, then released it slowly. This was the night I stopped being a ghost in my own life. The venue was the newly restored textile mill, a cathedral of red brick and industrial glass that soared into the night sky. The foundation had spent millions stabilizing the structure, turning a symbol of economic decay into a beacon of art and housing. It was beautiful, but it was also imposing. As I walked toward the entrance, the air was thick with humidity and the smell of expensive perfume. Flashbulbs popped in the distance, a strobe light of status. I checked my name at the entrance. The attendant did not look at a list. "Right this way. Ms. Coleman," he said. "You are seated at table 4. Table 4 was not in the back. It was front and center, right next to the podium. I walked through the crowd. I saw faces I recognized from the business pages of the newspaper. I saw a senator from Ohio. I saw the director of a major museum. They were drinking champagne and laughing, their voices a low hum of power. I did not take a glass. I needed a clear head. Marion Voss found me near the bar. She looked impeccable in a silver suit that caught the light like armor. "You look ready," she said. "I feel like I'm about to take a final exam." I admitted. "Good," she said. "Complacency is dangerous. Tonight is about visibility." "Bella. But it is the right kind of visibility. We are not selling a lifestyle. We are selling a mission." She guided me toward the table. "Sir Alton will introduce you during the opening remarks," she said, not as Elaine's granddaughter, as the project lead for the domestic initiative. I felt a jolt of pride. Project lead. I sat down. The dinner began. It was a blur of speeches and polite applause, but my senses were dialed up to 11. I was watching the room, scanning for threats, just as Marion had taught me, and then, halfway through the main course, the threat materialized. A man approached our table. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit poorly, and he carried a notepad. Not a drink. He didn't look like a donor. He looked hungry. "Ms. Voss," he said, leaning in too close. "And this must be the mysterious Ms. Coleman." Marion stiffened. Her eyes went cold, the temperature dropping instantly. "We are eating." "Mr. Evans," she said. "I just have a few questions for the article," the man said, ignoring her dismissal. He turned his gaze to me. His eyes were predatory. "There is a lot of chatter about the funding for this project. Ms. Coleman, rumors of a European royal trust, and your name keeps coming up in connection with let us call it a private appointment." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was a trap. "Is it true that your family has a secret channel to the House of Saxe-Weimar? Is that why you were given this position over more qualified candidates?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a general question. This was specific. Secret channel. Private appointment. These were phrases that had been used in confidential briefings. And then I saw her. Standing about 20 feet away, near a pillar, was a woman in a bright pink dress. She was holding a martini and watching us with a look of intense, malicious satisfaction. It was Mrs. Vance, my mother's friend, the woman who had been at the brunch where I received the invitation. She caught my eye and raised her glass in a mock toast. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The leak wasn't just Miles Hartley. It was a coordinated campaign. Mrs. Vance was here, likely on a guest pass secured through Juniper Ridge connections, and she had pointed this journalist right at me. She had fed him the narrative. The suburban girl playing princess, the nepotism, the secret royal money. If I didn't handle this right, the story tomorrow wouldn't be about the community center. It would be about Bella Coleman. the unqualified socialite involved in a shadowy royal scandal. The journalist pressed his pen to the paper. Well, are you a liaison or a beneficiary? Marion started to stand up. I could see the fury in her face. She was going to cut him off, have security remove him. But that would look like a cover-up. That would look like guilt. I placed a hand on Marion's arm. Sit down. Marion, I said quietly. I turned to the journalist. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. Mr. Evans, is it? I asked. He blinked, surprised by my directness. Yes, you are asking about the source of the funding. I said, that is a fair question. Transparency is important. I stood up. I wasn't tall, but in that moment, I felt 10 feet high. The funding for this center comes from a coalition of historical preservation trusts who believe that dignity is not a luxury good. I said, my role is to ensure that every dollar goes to the architects, the masons, and the social workers who built this place. It is not a royal appointment. It is a job. I gestured to the room, to the workers and community leaders sitting at the other tables. If you want to write a story about secrets, you can write about why it took 20 years for this town to get the investment it deserved. You can write about the redlining that kept this neighborhood poor. But if you are looking for a fairy tale about a princess, you are at the wrong party. This is a construction site. The people at the nearby tables had stopped eating. They were listening. I continued, my voice steady. And as for my family, my grandmother taught me that the only legacy worth having is the one you build with your own hands. I am here to work. If you have questions about the brickwork, I am happy to answer them. If you have questions about gossip, I suggest you ask the person who pointed you in my direction. I looked directly at Mrs. Vance. She froze. The journalist turned to follow my gaze. Mrs. Vance suddenly looked very interested in her olives. The journalist looked back at me. He saw the steel in my eyes. He saw that I wasn't going to crack, or cry, or give him a pull quote about a prince. He capped his pen. Thank you for the clarification, Ms. Coleman, he said stiffly. He walked away. I sat down. My legs were shaking under the table, but my hands were still. Marion looked at me. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, she picked up her wine glass. That was dangerous, she said softly. It was necessary. I replied. Sir Alton leaned forward. He looked delighted. It was brilliant, he rumbled. You bored him with ethics. There is nothing a tabloid journalist hates more than integrity. It kills the headline. I took a sip of water. I had survived. I had won the skirmish. But as the adrenaline faded, I felt the weight of the room shifting. People were looking at me differently now. Before, I was a curiosity. Now, I was a player. And in this world, players were targets. I could feel the eyes on my back, calculating, assessing, waiting for a mistake. I realized then that the anonymity I had cherished was gone. I had stepped into the arena, and there was no exit door. The gala ended at 11. I went back to my hotel room and collapsed onto the bed. Fully clothed, my brain was buzzing with the noise of the crowd, the flash of the camera, the look on Mrs. Vance's face. My phone pinged. It was a secure message from Marion. You handled yourself well tonight. The board is pleased. However, we must be realistic. I sat up, the screen glowing in the dark room. The incident with the journalist confirms that your personal history is now a liability. The network will continue to support your position. But strict boundaries must be enforced. If your family continues to generate noise, we will be forced to sever the connection to protect the mission. We cannot afford a spectacle. This is the condition of your tenure. You must control your own house. If you cannot, we will lock the door. I stared at the message. It was a victory, but it was a conditional one. I had the job, but I had a gun to my head. Control your own house. It was unfair. How could I control people like Lorraine and Tessa? They were hurricanes of need and insecurity, but then I thought about Elaine. She had controlled them. She had done it with silence. She had done it by refusing to give them fuel. I turned off the phone. I didn't sleep well. I dreamed of wax seals and microphones that wouldn't turn off. I returned to Westbridge 2 days later. Lorraine had sent a group text to the family, and pointedly, to me, announcing a Sunday brunch. She called it a family reconnection. I knew exactly what it was. It was a fishing expedition. Mrs. Vance would have reported back everything she saw at the gala. The speech, the confrontation, the status. Lorraine would be practically vibrating with the need to know the details. I could have skipped it. I could have stayed in New York. But Marion's text was burned into my mind. Control your own house. If I ran away, the rumors would grow. Lorraine would invent a story to fill the silence. She would tell people I was secretly engaged, or that I was being hidden away by the royals. She would spin a fantasy that would eventually blow up in my face. I had to go back. I had to kill the fantasy. I drove to the house on Sunday morning. The gravel driveway sounded the same, but the house looked smaller to me now. It looked like a stage set for a play I had outgrown. I walked in. The table was set for 8. Lorraine, Graham, Tessa, and 4 guests. Mrs. Vance, of course, and 3 other women from the club. The gossip hierarchy of Westbridge. Lorraine came rushing at me, arms wide. "The conquering hero returns," she cried. Kissing the air next to my cheek, we heard all about the gala. Mrs. Vance said it was simply exquisite. I pulled back. "Hello? Mother?" I said. I walked into the dining room. Tessa was sitting at her usual spot, but she looked diminished. Her shoulders were hunched, and she was picking at a loose thread on the tablecloth. She didn't look at me. The guests turned to stare. Their eyes were hungry. They wanted the scoop. They wanted to know about the prince. "So, Bella," Mrs. Vance said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "tell us everything. Is it true you sat with the Duke?" "There was no Duke," I said, taking my seat. Lorraine laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. "Oh, Bella is so modest. She always downplays things." I unfolded my napkin. "I am not downplaying anything." I said, "I am correcting the record." Graham cleared his throat. He looked tired. The scandal with Miles's father had clearly taken a toll on his social standing, and he looked like a man trying to keep a leaking boat afloat. "Let us just have a nice meal," he said. We were served quiche. The conversation swirled around safe topics for 5 minutes. The weather, the new tennis instructor, before Lorraine couldn't help herself. "But really, darling," Lorraine said, leaning forward, "we are all dying to know. What is your actual title now?" "Mrs. Vance said you gave a speech." I put down my fork. "I am a consultant." I said, "A consultant?" one of the other women asked. Disappointed. "I work for the Alderbrook Foundation," I said clearly, addressing the table. "It is a philanthropic organization that focuses on historical preservation and community development. My job is to vet construction contracts and audit grant proposals. It is mostly paperwork." The table went quiet. This was not the story they wanted, but the royal connection? Mrs. Vance pressed. "The funding?" "The funding comes from private trusts." I said, "It is not a royal court. It is a bank account, and the work is about affordable housing in industrial towns. It is not glamorous. It is brick and mortar." Lorraine's smile was straining at the edges. "Well, surely there are perks," she said. "The travel, the parties." I looked at my mother. I saw the desperation in her eyes. She needed me to be special so she could be special. "There are no perks," I said. "There are no parties." The gala was a fundraiser. I was working. I took a sip of water, and I want to be very clear about something else. I said, I looked at Mrs. Vance, then at Lorraine. Because of the sensitive nature of the financial work I do, I am subject to strict compliance rules. I cannot discuss donors. I cannot discuss clients. And I absolutely cannot facilitate introductions. Lorraine's face fell. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean that if anyone asks you for a favor, or an introduction, or a grant, the answer is no." I said, "I have no power to give handouts." Lorraine laughed again, but it sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Bella, family helps family. Not in this case. I said. In fact, per the terms of my employment, any attempt to use my position for social or personal gain will result in my immediate termination, and more importantly, I paused. I wanted to make sure they heard this. I have directed the foundation that any charitable giving associated with my name or my family's name is to be automatically routed to the Community Defense Fund. The what? Graham asked. It is a legal defense fund for indigent workers. I said, it is a wonderful cause, but it does not host galas. It does not have a country club membership. It just pays bail for people who can't afford it. The silence in the room was absolute. So, I continued, my voice pleasant and light. If you tell people I have connections, you are essentially telling them that we are donating to a bail fund, which I am sure is very noble, but perhaps not the social cachet you were hoping for. Mrs. Vance looked horrified. A bail fund was not something one bragged about at Juniper Ridge. Lorraine looked like I had slapped her. You did that on purpose, she whispered. I did it to protect the work. I said, and to protect you from making promises I cannot keep. I picked up my fork and took a bite of quiche. This is delicious. Mom, did you change the recipe? The rest of the brunch was excruciating. The guests ate quickly and made excuses to leave early. The fantasy had been popped. There was no prince. There was no castle. There was just a daughter who audited construction sites and donated to public defenders. I had made myself boring, and in doing so, I had made myself free. When the guests had gone, Lorraine stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door. You ruined it, she said. Her voice was flat. I told the truth. I said, you humiliated us, she said, turning to face me. You made us look common. We are common. Mom, I said gently, and that is okay. She shook her head, tears of rage in her eyes. It is not okay for me. She spat. She turned and walked up the stairs. Slamming her bedroom door, Graham sighed. He looked at me, then at the floor. You are hard, Bella, he said. I had to be, I replied. He nodded, defeated, and retreated to his study. I was left alone in the hallway with Tessa. She hadn't moved from the table. She was still sitting there, staring at her plate. I walked back into the dining room. Tessa? I said. She didn't look up. Miles broke up with me, she said. Her voice was small, devoid of its usual sharpness. I am sorry, I said, and I meant it. His dad lost the firm. She said, they are being sued. Miles said I was toxic. He said my family was poison. She let out a short, wet laugh. He was the one spying on you, but I am the toxic one. She finally looked at me. Her mascara was smeared. She looked young. I am so tired, Bella, she whispered. I am so tired of trying to be the person they want me to be. I spent 3 years trying to get into that club. I spent every penny I made on clothes I couldn't afford. I lied about my job. I lied about everything. And for what? She gestured to the empty table. For this? For a brunch where we eat cold eggs and pretend we are happy? She put her head in her hands and started to cry. It wasn't a performance. It was the quiet, ugly crying of someone who has realized they have been running a race on a treadmill. I walked over to her. I wanted to hug her, but I knew that would be too much. We weren't there yet. I pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. You don't have to perform anymore. Tessa, I said. She looked up, sniffing. But that is all I know how to do, she said. Mom says, Mom is wrong. I interrupted. I reached into my purse and pulled out a card. It wasn't a business card. It was just a blank piece of paper where I had written my personal cell number. The new one. The one Lorraine didn't have. I slid it across the table. This is my number. I said, my real number. Tessa looked at it. If you want to talk, I said, about real things, about how much it sucks to be broke, or how scary it is to figure out who you are when you stop pretending. Call me. I stood up. But Tessa? Yeah? She asked, wiping her eyes. Don't give it to Mom, and don't give it to Dad. If you do, I will change it again. She looked at the card, then at me. Okay, she whispered. I am not going to rescue you. Tessa, I said, I can't get you a job. I can't get you back into the club. You have to figure that out. But I will be your sister. If you want a sister. Tessa picked up the card. She held it like it was fragile. I think I would like that, she said. I nodded. I walked out of the house. The sun was shining in Westbridge. The lawns were perfectly green. The fences were perfectly white. It was a picture of a life that looked perfect from the outside, but was hollow on the inside. I got into my car. I threw my bag into the passenger seat. I looked at the house one last time. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. I hadn't burned the house down. I hadn't destroyed my family. I had just stopped holding up the walls for them. I started the engine. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Marion. Briefing at 800 tomorrow. New grant proposal for a library in Detroit. Pack a bag. I smiled. I put the car in gear and drove away from the gravel driveway. The sound of the stones crunching beneath my tires fading into the distance. I was going to work. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey of finding a voice in a room full of noise, and I hope Bella's path resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below and tell me which part of the world you call home, and if you enjoyed this story. Please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, growth, and the quiet power of truth. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time.